Hi, I'm Brendan Montgomery, editor-in-chief of Sequential Magazine, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Brandan Montgomery about the 2021 Sequential Magazine Awards. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Brendan is the editor of Sequential Magazine and founder of the Canadian Independent Comic Book Wiki. Sequential Magazine was created to raise the profile of new talented creators, promote the local creators, and promote quality over quantity while reviving the Canadian comic book history and celebrate the avant-garde. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Brandan Montgomery about the 2021 Sequential Magazine Awards. So, Brendan Montgomery, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Before we get started, though, wanted to ask you, what's on your bedside reading table? What are you reading today?
Most recently, I haven't actually opened it up yet, but the newest issue of Saga number 55.
Mm-hmm. That's very timely.
That's the big hot thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And also recently, the DC's Future State, trying to catch up on some of that.
Yeah, it's tough to catch up. I tell you, I've got a stack of books here that I still have to find time for, but lots of good reading to do these days, that's for sure. That's for sure. So we're here talking about Sequential Magazine. You're the editor. And maybe before we get into some of the other questions here, maybe you could just remind people, what is Sequential Magazine all about?
Yeah, sure. So Sequential Magazine is an independently published magazine covering Canadian comic books, and we focused on self-published and indie creators with the goal of just spreading more awareness about what new books people are putting out there, what creators are interesting and up and coming, to try to help promote the Canadian indie comic scene.
It definitely is very worthwhile. I mean, I've contributed a few articles and certainly learned a few things along the way, and I think a lot of people do when they read the magazine, so it's very helpful in that regard. So we're here chatting about the 2021 Sequential Magazine Awards. It's that time of year again. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, how long it's been running and what are the awards all about?
Yeah, for sure. So the awards I started about in 2017, and that was before Sequential Magazine actually existed. I started the awards for my Canadian Independent Comic Book Wiki website, which is still around if you want to check it out, but I'm not actively developing that anymore now that I've switched to the magazine. But I did want to just have a fan-voted award for that. So with the idea of Wiki being community building and community contributions, I thought a fan-voted awards, which is something we didn't have in Canada for Canadian comics. There's other juried awards, the Joe Shuster Awards and the Doug Wright Awards. But if those are the Oscars and what have you, then we needed a people's choice.
Very good.
I wanted to start up a more grassroots fan voted awards originally for that website, and then once I started the magazine, it was a good thing to keep going and kind of breathe a little new life into it with the magazine.
Sure.
So now it's an awards that the contributors to the magazine each year select amongst a number of categories the best Canadian comics and creators for the year, and then we present that to the fans, and then the fans have the ultimate choice in the public voting.
Cool. What sort of categories? I mean, it's more than just like favorite comic. Like, what other categories do you have in these awards?
Yeah, so we've broken it into book awards and creator awards. You can think about it that way. So we have best comic book, best graphic novel, best web comic, and then for creators we have writer, favorite artist, favorite cartoonist, favorite colorist, and favorite letterer. So the difference between comic book and graphic novel is basically length, which kind of makes it a little more fair in terms of comparing things. If one is only 30 pages long and the other one's 80 pages long, the longer thing has a little more storytelling capabilities. So it's mainly more of a length distinguishing than actual book format or what have you. And either of these could be published digitally, whereas a webcomic we're considering for any ongoing online comic. So you can these days sell a PDF of a comic book online, but that's not necessarily a webcomic because it's still a singular unit that you're selling. And then whereas webcomics are, they don't necessarily have to be free to read online, I guess, but at least ongoing online, kind of serialized more so, whereas a comic or graphic novel could still be sold digitally, but as a one-off purchase.
Yeah, we've certainly seen an advent of, people really using the internet to spread the word, whether it's webcomic or creating their own comic book or doing just digital stuff in general. And especially, I know this year was kind of tough because people were having trouble getting books published. There was a paper shortage. That was a bit of an issue too.
Yeah, I'm still on the mailing list for a publisher that I used in closer to almost 10 years now, not quite, like 8 or 9 years ago. And I'm still getting their updates on paper prices going up.
Yeah.
Once you're on your email list or whatever, I guess. Anyway, and then it's pretty bad. So more and more indie people will still sell digitally, I think.
Sure.
Because
absolutely.
of that. Yeah. So that's why, webcomics are more serialized on compared to so that's the distinguish, because it is a different thing if you're uploading it every week or so or whatever. It's a different way to tell a story, so it is a different medium and it's harder to compare. And then for the creator categories, we have writer, artist, and cartoonist. So cartoonist is what we're calling someone who does both. So primarily, so if they're in their books and stuff, are they doing both art and writing? But it gets, people do, there's some gray area there and who does what. Sometimes someone who can do both, let's say, is practiced in doing both, will sometimes just draw on a book and then sometimes do both. So it can vary, but our nominations come from the creators themselves mostly. We do choose some as well. So it depends on what they prefer, I guess, to go in as, I guess.
I know we'd be here all night if you were to list all the nominees, which are very worthwhile, of course, but maybe perhaps for the sake of time, we could just focus on one category and maybe you could just go through those nominees.
Sure. So our award, I guess, that garners the most interest is Best Comic Book. That's what everyone's here for. No, graphic novels are obviously equal as well, but for the Best Comic Book this year, we have 8 nominees. So first off is Dark Fragments by John Ward and a team of artists. It was 8 artists, I think. A little kind of mini anthology, but it was all written by John. So that's more in the darker horror-ish, kind of, not hard horror, I think, but darker horror category. And then we have sci-fi book Tales from the Interface, number 3 by Emmanuel Filto, who did both the story and the art. And then we also have Side Quest number 3 by Grant Stoy and Alaire Rassicot. And then we have Seeds of Spring number 3. This is a Indigenous created book with Christopher Cocquard as the writer and Sasha Ravenda as the artist. And then we have Resilient number 1 by George Michael and Vince L. Tabernas. Yeah, it's a creator-owned series. And then we have 88, which is a sci-fi series from Vashperado, is his artist name, also known as Mike Nesbitt, and also co-wrote by Steve Nesbitt. And then we have Mother Trucker, written and illustrated by Andy Belanger with his new Lethal Comics imprint. And that was the cover story for our last Sequential magazine. And then finally, we have Code 45, issues 2 and 3 by writer Benjamin Hunting and artist Joe Ng. And that's a Montreal-based writer. Yeah, so that story is actually about some fantasy dragon elements in the subway of Montreal lurking around. Yeah, so there's, I can't really go into all their details, but those are the books that we are highlighting for the best comic book this year, and that the fans will be able to vote for their favorite.
That's great. It's a lot of good talent there, and I guess it looks like there's a good cross section from across the country. Do you see that we're getting creators from all over the place?
Oh yeah, we do try. I mean, I don't have everyone's address written down here, so I couldn't actually specifically choose nominees from every province or anything. And so no, so we were focused more on content than where exactly they were from.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, all of these books were created by Canadians. I mean, maybe not entire teams, but at least a major creator, writer, or artist. Yeah, I mean, some of them are from coast to coast, I guess. Still, I mean, we do generally see more creative people in the larger cities.
Right.
That's kind of how things congregate, just demographically. But yeah, certainly every major city in Canada has all kinds of comic talent these days.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that judges are from the magazine, but without, you don't have to mention them by name, but in general, do they represent the independent comic scene in Canada?
Yeah, so all of our contributors to our magazine had the option of submitting their choices for what they wanted to nominate, and then I pooled them together and tried to balance out as many of them as I could. Yeah, so they are just our creators in general, though, for the magazine some of them are comic book creators themselves, or some of them are just super fans or journalists who are interested in covering comic books. But everyone has a strong tie in one way or another to the Canadian comic book scene.
As you mentioned before, I mean, once the nominees are announced, how do people get involved in the voting?
Yeah, so we'll be posting on the Sequential blog, sequentialpulp.ca. There'll be a post there about the voting, so you'll be able to read all the nominees there, and then there'll be a button to go to the voting form, and it's just a online form to submit your choices. So yeah, so it's all online and real easy to get to, and then you'll be able to share that with your other comic book reading friends so they can have their voices as well.
And there's no cost to this at all?
No. Everything is free, and actually our awards themselves are sponsored by Strange Adventures Comics and Curiosities in Halifax. So they're big supporters of the Canadian independent comic book scene, so they're helping us produce the plaques for the winners.
Nice, yes. They're very good folks out there on the East Coast, I tell you, yes. Absolutely. I know that you're going to be starting up the nominees and letting them, get people to vote. But when will the award winners be announced?
Yeah, so we'll have the public voting for most of February. First weekend in February, it'll launch until the February 28th is when people will be able to vote. And then I'll take a little bit of time to tabulate them and contact the winners and get their acceptances. And then we'll be able to announce it mid-March or so.
And that'll be on the Sequential Magazine website and in the magazine too?
Yeah, so that'll be on our sequentialpulp.ca as well. And then once I gather comments from the winners, I can put those quotes all together into an article for our next issue of the magazine.
Well, Brendan, those are all the questions I have. Is there something we didn't cover about these awards that you want to get across in this interview?
Yeah, again, it's fan voted, so fans have the ultimate choice on who's going to win. But then we put together our best choices from the nominations we received and our own choices, and then we'll see how everyone does.
Thanks to Brandan for the chat. You can discover more about Sequential Magazine on Twitter at sequential_CA and online at sequentialpulp.ca. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.